Hey, so today gonna be making a banana cream pie. You might notice I said making, not baking, because the baking part is optional. I like to bake a little bit, but mostly this is actually cooking, not necessarily baking. If you consider baking to be, you have to use an oven. For the cream pie, you're going to be cooking the cream down on your stovetop. And the pie crust is really up to you whether you want to bake it or not. Because I use a cookie crust. You can use just a single pie crust. This is not a covered pie, obviously. Most cream pies aren't. But if you use a regular pie crust, of course you have to bake the pie crust. If you use a cookie crust, then you get the choice. Do you want to bake it? Do you want to not? And I generally do because I think it holds together better in the finished product. And it brings out a little bit more flavor from cooking the cookies a little bit. But you can use whatever cookies you got. In my case, it's been long enough since Christmas that giant tin of cookies that you got that didn't actually get eaten, because they never all get eaten for Christmas, has just been sitting around, and it's time for it to go. No one's going to eat those cookies anymore. It's time for it to go. So I put it to good use. I turned them to, these are all going to get busted up into a pie crust. Hooray! You can use any crunchy cookie that you've got. Like I said, I've got just these nice hard butter cookies. It's also, of course, Scout season at the moment, so you could get any of their harder cookies. You don't want any of the gooey ones with caramel on them, anything like that, but any crunchy cookie. You could even use Oreos, although I would recommend cleaning the filling out, just because it changes the structure of your crust if you try to leave it in. And it gets kind of gooey and doesn't stick together as well and doesn't really hold as a crust. It's great as a filling, not so much as a crust. So if you go for, a filled cookie of any kind, probably want to clean the filling out before you use the cookie bits, which are usually a nice crunchy cookie. So hooray for that. But these cookies are going to get tossed into my food processor and ground up till they're nice and fine. And then I'm going to start with a half cup of butter. And I say start with because it will depend on your cookie and how dry it actually is for exactly how much butter you need to put in. You might need more butter than a half cup. You won't generally need less. But it is kind of an eyeball it. How much cookie you put in, that's also, you eyeball it. There's an exact recipe for this, because it'll depend on your pie tin. Are you a deep dish pie tin? Is this, an 8-inch, a 9-inch? How big is that? So that'll depend on how much cookie you put in. You just want to be able to cover the pie tin in a decent, but not like super thick, layer of crumbs. And I'm going to grind this up, add my butter, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it comes out. We should end up with wet sand is the general guide for how you want this to be. So I'll process these and I'll be back. All right, so I've blended my cookies, turned them into a nice fine powder. I've added a half cup of butter. That did seem to be just about enough. So now we've got wet sand. And I'm going to take this wet sand, you just kind of blip, and you just dump it into your pie shell. Keep the bowl handy just in case. And you're just going to press it all around. You don't need to grease your pie tin because you put in so much butter that it basically greases itself. And this won't stick together. Don't expect this to stick together. But you can press it into the shell, and if it gets a little thick, that's okay. Just pull out the excess, put it into a freezer bag, and you can just freeze that mixture until you bake another pie. As long as you're going to bake it, sometime relatively soon, next couple of weeks maybe. But you're just pressing it in, make sure you get to the edges, and make sure that you don't get too thin along the sides. This is not a regular pie crust like you would roll out. It needs to be kind of thick. Not like super chunky, but kind of thick. And if you discover that you didn't do enough, that it won't cover, if you have more cookies, blend that up. If you have another kind of cookie, go ahead and blend that up. You might want to take everything out and then mix it all up together so that, cookie flavors meld. But there's that, and you can see it's just kind of packed in. And this is just going to sit and rest if you don't want to bake it. Because this is just fine. You can leave it as it is if you want to. I am going to bake this because I think it brings out the flavor and helps things kind of set and seal up a little better. There's, arguments, debates on whether you should or shouldn't or how that works. And I just like to bake it a little bit. It makes me feel better. So I've just turned on my oven to 350, nice standard temperature. I'm going to toss this in for 10 minutes. Being a cookie crust, you don't need like pie weights or anything. And just bake it off a little bit and then pull it out and let it sit to cool. You could put it someplace chilly, like if your garage or somewhere is colder, might stick it there just to make sure that it chills down, because you are going to want this crust to be cold when you fill it. But I'm going to go ahead and pop this in the oven for 10 minutes. It won't really look any different from when it goes in to when it comes out. But then bake it off just a little bit, pull it out, let it chill, and then I'm going to get to work on the filling. Right, our pie crust is baked and it's out and cooling. Now it's time to move on to the filling. I told you this was a banana cream pie. It is, but probably not the kind that you've encountered a whole lot before. I'm not going to blend the bananas. I'm not going to put that as the whole filling. The bananas are going in with a vanilla cream around them. I really like that mixture of flavors, that you can have the separate bits, and I think it's a prettier presentation to have the whole banana in there. So, to make my version of a banana cream pie, we're going to do the cream filling. And you can see my bananas here, they are past where you'd want to eat them, or at least where I would want to eat them. And that always happens. I get bananas and they go past where I want to actually just peel them and eat them. And what do I do with them? Banana cream pie, hooray. So, about so many things. But this is one of them. So these are actually just going to sit to the side because we're going to slice those into our crust. But if you do it early, they're going to turn brown and look gross. It doesn't affect the flavor. It doesn't affect the texture, really. It just makes them look gross. So they're going to sit there until it's right on time to slice them and put them in. But let's turn our attention to the cream filling. I've got 3/4 cups of sugar, a 1/4 cup of cornstarch, and yes, this will get everywhere. It always does. 3 cups of milk over here. 3 egg yolks, just the yolks, slightly beaten. Don't get rid of the whites. The whites are fantastic, just not for this recipe. Put them in a container, put them in the fridge. You can absolutely do things with those. Make a meringue. So good. But for now, we're just using the yolks, slightly beaten. Later, but not yet. We're going to get 2 tablespoons of butter and 2 teaspoons of vanilla. But to start with, we're going to combine our sugar, our cornstarch, and try to get as much of this out as you can. Like I said, it's going to get all over. It's cornstarch. It's super fine, and it sticks to everything. But get out as much as you can. Off the bowl, off your hands, and into the pan. Yeah, everywhere. And your salt. Like I said, it's just a 1/4 teaspoon, not much salt at all, but very important. You need it. So get that in there. And we're going to mix all that up until you can't really tell one from the other anymore. When they say well mixed, that's basically what they're looking for, is that when you can't tell your different ingredients. And you'll get a cloud of cornstarch coming out of this. Just try not to breathe too deep. Okay, so that's mixed in. Now, we're going to stir in the milk. And I'm no good at the 2-hand thing of pouring and stirring at the same time, so I do one after the other. And you want to stir this up till you can't feel any of your dry ingredients anymore. So you know that that's well blended. And make sure you get in all the edges. Otherwise, once you start heating this, you're going to get lumps. Okay, that's all mixed in. So we're going to take this to the stove, cook it over a medium heat until it boils, and then it's going to thicken. And you're going to keep stirring constantly the whole time. You cannot walk away from this. You have to keep stirring. Once that's done, take it off the heat. Well, boil it. It'll be about 2 minutes that's going to boil before it really gets thickened and set. So get it to a boil. Figure you're going to boil it for 2 minutes, stirring the whole time. Take it off the heat. Put a little of this into your eggs, just a little. You're tempering your eggs. Mix that all together. Then you pour that back into the hot mixture. Blend everything really, really good. Put it back on the stove. You cook it until it just begins to bubble, always stirring. Take it off the heat again. Then you're going to put in those 2 tablespoons of butter and 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Only at the end. Those never touch it when it's on the heat. And once again, mix that really, really good. And from there, you're going to let this sit. If this was just a cream pie, you'd pour it straight into the pie shell, but it's a banana cream pie. So that is when you're going to set this aside, and after it's cooked, let it cool down till it's lukewarm. When it's close to ready, you're going to slice up your bananas, 2 or 3, depends on your pie shell, depends on, all those variables for making this kind of pie. How big are your bananas? How big is your pie shell? All of that. You slice these into your cooled baked pie shell. Like I said, you don't have to bake it. I like to bake it. And once those are sliced in, and this is lukewarm, you pour this over the bananas in the pie shell. If you want your bananas to stay pretty, dip them in lemon juice. It's going to make them stay pretty a little longer. I don't much worry about it because they're going to be covered by my filling. And then we're going to be slicing and eating it, and hopefully it all gets sliced and eaten. And I can taste a little bit of lemon juice. I don't really like that tang in there. Bah, some people can't even taste it. So we're going to go ahead and bake this off and then set it aside to cool until it gets to lukewarm. And I'll show you what it looks like after that. All right, we've made it to the next step on our banana cream pie. The cream is cooled. It's not cool but it's still lukewarm. You don't want it to get too cold. It'll get lumpy and it won't pour. But you also don't want it to be so hot it's going to cook your bananas. So we're at that nice stage in between. And let's set this up. We've got our cool-ish, lukewarm, still warm cream. And I have sliced up, this is 3 bananas that it took to fill this. And I say fill, and I know you're looking at it going, that's not full. No, but you want your bananas to be below the level of where your cream is going to end up. They should be completely covered. And remember, if you decided not to bake your crust, at this point there's no baking at all. You just pour the cream in. You just kind of pour it on top. Get a spatula, scrape out all that goodness. If you have kids, don't scrape too much. They'll want to lick the pan. Or maybe you'll want to lick the pan. Either way. But get all of that poured out. I just want to spread it so it hits all the corners. Make sure you get everything covered. No bits of banana sticking out. And then what you can actually do is just give it some jiggle and maybe a couple of taps just to try to get that cream down into your bananas. Now, if you didn't want to bake it all, you're done. That's it. You put this in the fridge with a bit of a cover so it doesn't get a terrible skin on it. And it just refrigerates until you're ready to slice and eat it. Give it at least 3 hours to fully set. And, you know, things kind of sink and settle in there. But, remember earlier we'd had those egg whites that I said we didn't need for this recipe? We didn't. If you didn't want to bake, you're done. If you do want to bake, you can do meringue topping on this. And that takes this pie to a whole new level. So for that meringue topping, we're going to take the 3 egg whites from earlier, where we just used their yolks for in here. Now we're going to use just their whites. And you want to put those into a bowl with a 1/4 teaspoon cream of tartar. Not a ton. Just enough for what we need. And we're going to beat this in until it gets frothy. So that shouldn't take too long. You just beat that up. And it's going to look chunky at first because that cream of tartar doesn't really want to break up. We're going to make it break up. Just keep beating and it's going to eventually incorporate in. And you're going to get your egg whites nice and frothy. So once you've got that, turn that off so you can see. See, it's kind of bubbly in there, foaming up. Now, you're going to take a 1/3 cup granulated sugar, just plain sugar, and slowly add it in as you beat. And you're waiting for this mix to get sort of stiff peaks. You need it to be able to hold its shape. Think of any meringue that you've seen has kind of got ridges and edges, so you don't want it to be smooth. You need it to have stiff peaks, but not overbeaten. That's bad. Don't overbeat. So we're going to beat this in. meringue is done. It's got stiff peaks, no falling out. No, I did not do that over my head. But you want it to be stable. You can tip it around, nothing's going to fall, nothing's going to move. And solid peaks, they don't really fall over when you move them around. And we're just going to scrape this out and dump it. You're going to try to get it in the middle of your pie, because you're going to spread it around gently. The cream is not set, like solid. It is firm enough. It's jiggly. But you can still mush things in there. So you're going to very gently spread your meringue, and you want to be able to cover all of that cream. So you're going to push it out to the edges. Like I said, why you want to start in the middle is so that you can get a good push without really disturbing your cream too much. I'm just going to move that around, and having the hump in the middle, that's just fine. It's kind of the look of meringue pies, is to have that taller bit in the middle. So you just keep pushing that out to the edge all the way around. Don't push hard. You don't want to push this down into your cream. You want separate layers in there. And just go around and double check, finish off that edge, make sure that your meringue is onto the crust. You can't see any of your cream anymore. And once you've got that, you can try to just get it. I'm actually just tapping it with my spatula because it gets you these nice peaks. And those are going to brown and look nice in the oven. You can do it smooth. I like with the peaks better. It gets better color. So this is going to go into a 375-degree oven for 10 minutes. Or, depending on your oven, until your meringue is got golden brown, at least on the peaks and the edges, and it looks very pretty. And so that's what we're going for, and I'll show you when it is done. Here it is, our finished banana cream pie. You see it's golden brown. You still have some white down in the valleys, but the peaks are nice and golden, solid. So that is baked, and we're just gonna let this cool down and then pop it into the fridge. You want to give it a good time to set and firm up. So let it cool, just because you don't want to shock your fridge too much. Once it's cooled down enough, slide it into the fridge, give it, say, at least 3 hours. And then it will be delicious to eat. Enjoy baking, everybody.